Hello, you're listening to the Terrible Video Gamers Club Game Club podcast. We get together and we try and have a book club for video games. I'm joined by Tyler Schatz
Hello.
and Alex Purdy.
Hey.
And this week we're going to be talking about The Walking Dead Season 1 by Telltale Games. We choose our games based on sort of a process where we gathered a bunch of games and we chose two each and we threw them all into a randomizer. Last week we ended up, or not last week, our last episode that was lost to recording issues. We chose that game randomly. The other games on the list are Risk of Rain, another Tyler Schatz choice, Deliver Us the Moon from Purdy, Forza Horizon 4, also from Purdy, and I have added The Outer Wilds and The Stanley Parable to that list. So after our discussion here, we'll randomize the list here and find out what our game next time will be. But Shotzi, Telltale Walking Dead was your choice, so give us some thoughts on why you chose that game into this list.
Yeah, so The Walking Dead was the complete first season is what we're kind of touching here on. It's a 5-episode game here that basically essentially restarted and also eventually killed the Telltale Games here, Telltale Game Studio. It's basically just a revival somewhat of the adventure game genre here, although it doesn't have like puzzle solving or anything like that like the old ones used to. This is more of a game that's basically just click on something, kind of go there, and then a lot of it then comes down to your conversational choices you have with characters of just building the character group around you into kind of like a more diverse team, or kind of just it's all about choice basically. This is one of the games that kind of launched into the like along with the Mass Effect series, like games all about kind of how your choices impact the story around you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I had played the game. I've went into the second season a little bit even, but I'd played through the first full game and the 400 Days expansion prior to this. Purdy, you had not played any of it prior to this, right?
Correct. I'd only watched a little bit of a playthrough from a YouTuber, or I don't know if it was a streamer back then, but yeah, I had not played it before.
All right. And so I think Shotzi and I's experience with our replay will definitely be different, but I'm very eager to hear how things went for folks. Did you have any particular way you wanted to start things off, Shotzi, about the replay?
So I guess here the big thing is Purd, you only made it through episode 1, correct?
Yeah, because I was falling asleep.
Okay.
Oh,
so is it just the game itself did not engage you, or is it just the story? I guess the story, and so this is a kind of a weird game to talk about because this game it's the story pretty much. You either get hooked or you don't kind of get hooked by the story. Because the gameplay itself is kind of bad here. Like it is.
Yes.
It is
kind of clunky.
Yes, thank you. That's a great word for it there. So what was it, Purd, about basically the Walking Dead that basically said to you that like, no, this is not a game for me to continue on playing?
So the story, I didn't find the story to be like bad, but I also didn't, I don't know, it didn't really hook me. And then the fact that every action I did led to some sort of cutscene that had all the action in it. I don't know. I just I felt like I was just a casual observer of a TV show or something, where I was like, I wonder what happens if he says this to this person, versus feeling like I'm a part of the story myself. So I don't know. It felt kind of slow, and it was very like, for a zombie game, it felt very calming to me. Like I just wanted to like soak into my couch and like, oh, what's gonna happen? It just felt like I was playing a TV show. And while that sounds fun in my head, it was not fun for me in real life. I didn't hate it, but I was just literally, I was kind of dozing off, listening to him talk or listening to Clementine, and I'm like, this is not for me.
Yeah,
that's just my personal. I mean, I know it's a game. It's just for whatever reason, it did not do.
Yeah, so like definitely the first episode is kind of a slower episode. I mean, things definitely don't even get picked up until really about maybe episode 4, I think, is when things started kind of getting a lot more action oriented. But it's definitely not a game where you make a choice and then go do that action. You make a choice then to see how that action or how that choice basically then plays out going forward.
Yeah, because really it's the continuation of Telltale Games' legacy where they always had those point-and-click adventure games. If you ever see like Secret of Monkey Island and all those games being played, I mean, it's definitely, it is that, where you had a 2D screen in front of you that you were interacting with, and you clicked on something there and you watched the character walk over to it and then interact with that thing. And they just kind of took that idea and moved it to three-dimensional space, which they had done with some previous games like Sam and Max when they brought those back. But yeah, it's a different sort of play style. It's very much closer to something like a visual novel than a traditional role-playing game, even though you are given this character and given these choices like a modern role-playing game would give you. Yeah. And I'd agree that it was probably one of the slower episodes. I remember, not this time that I played it because I knew how things would go, but I remember the first time that I played it, it was definitely one of those points where I just wasn't quite sure what I was going to think of it at first. Is, you're walking around that backyard of that house right after the first major incident of the game and before you find Clementine, and it's just, you're kind of just walking around and you just don't really know what's happening. You're just hanging out in this idyllic backyard, not really doing much.
So to start off here, do a little rewind, since both JC and I played this before. So this game was released as like an episodic thing here, where like each month, maybe, I don't even remember what the release
I feel like they
was.
took a lot longer at some points, but yeah, I should look those up.
To kind of do a little history, did you play it, JC, like as each episode released, or did you play it all in one chunk pretty much, like after everything was done?
I feel like it was one of those where I might have slept on it for the first episode or two, but I definitely remember I was waiting for the final few episodes. I remember waiting for 3, 4, 5, and then 400 Days.
Okay, and then I played it too, I think in just one chunk. I had bought the entire thing at one point in time to just play through it. Okay. So kind of just recapping a little bit of what episode 1 was, is it's basically the introduction to Lee Everett, your protagonist, the guy you basically are throughout the game. Starts off with basically him leaving. I believe it's kind of that iconic Walking Dead shot of him basically driving out of Atlanta in the back of a cop car, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, headed out of Atlanta. Yep. He's from Athens, which speaks to my heart because I'm also from Athens. I did not remember that from playing it the first time, but as soon as he's like, oh, I'm from Athens. Oh, hey, me too.
So it starts out with basically them leaving, him kind of talking to the police officer about why he's in the back of the cop car here. And then basically I think it basically the game officially kind of just starts with the cop car running into a walker on the highway there and crashing off the road.
Yep. And then you kind of go from there, really, right? It's just, at that point, it's zombie time.
Yep. It's the apocalypse is here pretty much. So, did any of you guys ever run into any bugs kind of while playing through this here at this time, or anything that you noticed?
I didn't have any bugs, but I did have a point where I had to Google how to progress the story because I was going crazy trying to find that pharmacy key.
Yeah, that's one of the more adventure game style, like the classic adventure game stuff that kind of killed off the genre, was that they eventually leveled up their puzzles to where they were so convoluted that they made no logical sense. And I think that's one of the ones where it gets closest to that. As far as bugs, nothing directly that I could identify as a bug, just clunky game design. Like at some point there's a walker that's coming at you and you need to click on him to push him away, and I would try and click on him, but like as I would move, this is also the first time I played it with a mouse, because last time I was using an Xbox controller on the PC. And so playing with a mouse here, I'd try and click on him, but then as you move the mouse, the camera would shift around and your cursor gets locked to where it is relative on the screen. So if you like put it on, say, a ladder that's on the background, and then you walk left, it will your cursor will not stay where it is on the screen where the ladder was. It'll stay on that ladder, which is okay at times, but sometimes it does get locked to the camera position depending on what exact sort of scene is happening. And so it's just fighting that sometimes where I'm trying to click on the guy, but it's just a battle with that. And so it ended up being something I died like 3 times over. And I'm just like, I just need to click this guy's face. I know what I need to do.
Yeah, so I ran into some interesting kind of bugs throughout the game. Like the first one I have written down here for just episode 1 was there was just a nice crotch shot, basically, while the dialogue just came out. I'm like, well, this is cool. But then the bug I kind of constantly kept, I think, notating throughout the thing as it went on was during some of the dialogue, they would be talking along, and then all of a sudden it was just like it gets to the end of the dialogue conversation and it just stops at like the middle of a word.
Huh.
So I was like,
Interesting.
okay.
Because
Like I kind of knew what they were saying, but it's just like, it's just like, and then just moves on. I'm like, okay.
Because the version that was available on the Xbox, is that the remastered version that you were playing?
I don't know. I think it's just the definitive edition is what they call it, maybe.
Yeah, I was looking stuff up for it at one time. There are multiple versions of re-releases of this game. So the definitive edition, is that the one that has like all of the Walking Deads in it?
This is just season 1. I'm
Okay.
like, so all of the seasons I think are available on the Xbox, but this is just season 1 that was there.
Okay.
I should say they were separate games that I downloaded.
Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, this definitely has the remastered. I'm just pulling up a video of it here. It definitely has the remastered graphics, which
Okay.
make it look more like a comic book. But yeah, I'm not sure if this has actual remastered gameplay. It looks like it was probably 2019 that it came out, but yeah.
Yeah, the complete first season plus 400 days.
Right. Because I was looking around that and like the different graphics, graphic styles just looked a little weird to me from what I remembered of Walking Dead. And sure enough, going back to it, I think the graphic style is a nice. It still holds up. I think the way that they do that sort of comic book style. So I didn't have any issues with that myself.
And it should definitely be mentioned too. This is set in the Walking Dead comic book universe, not the Walking Dead TV show universe.
Yep, true. And yeah, as far as any sort of maybe the remaster added some bugs with it because I'm not sure if they like redid animations. I definitely had moments. I don't recall if they were completely there when they must have been when I first played it, but like you'd have the little puppet of the animation for the people in the conversation be talking, but no audio would just be coming out. And your character wouldn't necessarily reference that, what they were supposed to be saying. So it's just like, oh, they must have just cut that line, but didn't cut the animation. I don't know.
Yeah, this game was definitely known for some bugs back in its day. Like it would have a hard time basically remembering saves or just like wipe save files. I think was
yeah,
one of the big
I remember
ones.
hearing about all that. Yeah, I fortunately never encountered that because I think that would have just ended my playthrough if I lost a save partway through episode 3 or something.
Same here.
Yeah. Well, it's a shame you didn't experience more of it because I think episode 1 you end going basically to the hotel, and then episode 2 I think that's you mentioned episode 4 the action kind of starts off right, and episode 2 I think is where the story starts to really kick into gear for me at least.
No, episode 1 ends with the pharmacy, right?
No, you get to the hotel.
Hotel.
Yep, and that's where all the lights start turning off, and it ends the episode.
Yeah. Hotel. Okay. Yeah.
We can stay here forever. Click, click.
Yeah.
There go the lights. Yep.
Okay. Yep.
I feel like if you're going to be a storytelling game and that's your basis, you got to hook people in the beginning. Then you can't say episode 2 or 4 is when the story really gets. I mean, it's not like a TV season. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know, but I guess that's kind of my counter is. If you're not going to hook me in the first episode, why would I play the second?
And I think there were enough hooks, personally at least, in the first episode, there were enough hooks that I understood what was going on, and like I wanted to see more of what they were selling, essentially, because it was one of those where the that hotel setup. As soon as that clicked out, then I'm like, okay, well, I got to find out what happens to the hotel now, the rest of the way.
Yeah, I think this was too right around the time I started actually reading the comics too, so I was just kind of interested in this Walking Dead universe here too. So
yeah, because I think this was this around the time the TV show came out as well. Like, was it just full Walking Dead fever had set in at this point, or was this just before it?
It would have had to have probably been, I would imagine here. Just quickly Google that for reference.
To be fair, the Walking Dead TV show made me fall asleep too. So maybe it's just the whole zombie
zombies.
apocalypse attitude.
You just
is
look at
not
people
my
just
thing.
slowly shuffling, and you're like, "Oh, that seems comfy. I want to do that."
The first season of The Walking Dead show I thought was really interesting, but as it kind of progressed on, there's some breaking point where I was just like, I cannot watch this. I even tried a few years later to rewatch it when it was streaming, and I got to like the same points. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so bored.
Yeah.
October 31st, 2010 was the first episode of the TV show The Walking Dead.
Okay. And when did Telltale Walking Dead release? This is 2012 was the first. April 24th, 2012 was the Walking Dead Telltale episode 1 release date.
Okay.
So things had kind of set in at that point already then, right?
Yeah.
The TV show is kind of in full swing by then, and
Definitely in like that third or fourth season, which are pretty good seasons of The Walking Dead. I think that's when the governor is showing up in that season. Season 3, I think.
yeah. I did not make it to that season of the TV show. I also have fallen off of that.
Did you check out after season 2?
I think so. Yeah. I couldn't tell you exactly. I remember the scene, but I don't want to get into the spoilers of it here. But yeah, it's
okay.
Yep. And then I was done. And so I think The Walking Dead, like the Walking Dead TV show, I was even talking about this with someone else last night. It's very much just like it felt for a while that it was just mounting misery on top of misery and just trying to out horrible world itself each week. Whereas, bad things happen in the Telltale game series, The Walking Dead, but I always felt like there was at least a little bit of hope. There was something to try and fight for, and so I liked that part.
I think the big attachment came for basically like for me was Clementine and I think this kind of plays into the discussion you and I had way back when we both finally finished the game here of like I played the game basically as though I was Lee, but like I wasn't Lee, like I was using Lee to protect Clementine the entire game. That was my playthrough of it there. And I think I even kind of did that the same way this time because I went in this time knowing full knowledge of like what happens to Lee at the end. It's like, okay, some of these points won't matter here, so I don't need to do this thing like I did before.
Yeah, I tried to just go into it purely raw. I didn't. There would be certain story points whenever I would hit them and go like, oh yeah, I remember this, but I wouldn't remember exactly what I chose to get those results. So I just go with what I felt. I tried to re-roll it essentially as cleanly as I could, which was interesting. Then going back to the previous game stats, because at the end of each episode it'll break down the stats of like, oh, here's the top 5 decision tree points in this game in this episode, and here's what you chose versus how much the other player base chose. It brings up the world stats. And so I would go back to those pages because I had my previous save and compare it to it, and it'd be like 1 or 2 points different, and they were usually not the ones that ultimately like were the big moral choice. So I found that it was interesting that I guess my moral compass has not changed in a decade, so that's good. I guess
that is a good thing.
Well, I mean, yeah, hopefully it's right and it hasn't changed, I guess.
Yeah, there were definitely points I'm pretty for sure I made the same as what I did before when I played through, but like going like season or episode 5, I think there's one big thing you can do in episode 5 that doesn't impact either way at the end of what happens to Lee.
Yeah, okay, I think I know what you're saying now. Yes. Yeah.
Can we not just say spoilers and talk about it?
If you're
this game's been out for how long?
I was saying it for your case if we maybe convinced you to go back and try it out again. But if you don't care,
no, please go ahead.
So I think in episode 5, not to skip the story around too much, but we were talking earlier, I don't think we necessarily need to get into the story heavily. We don't need to tell you like, oh, in episode 2 you do this. Episode 3 this. So episode 5 ends up Lee gets bitten.
Episode 4.
Episode 4, yes. Episode 4 at the very end, he gets bitten.
Oh, really?
Yes. And so episode 5, in order to try and slow down the spread of the disease that kills you and everything from being bitten, they cut off his arm. Well, you have the option.
You have the choice
yes.
too, yeah.
Yes. Yep. And speaking a bit to the way that the gameplay is structured, they can't just say like, well, you cut off his arm, so you get 4 more hours of gameplay or something like that. Like there's a secret episode 6. If you if it does work and it doesn't stop it does work to slow the disease or whatever. It's like they can't really do that. So the story choices end up becoming pretty shoehorned, and especially near the end game, whenever you do see something like that, where he has a chance to cut off his arm. But ultimately, like, the rest of the story is still the same. You're still going to the same locations. You're doing the same things. And did you chop off the arm then this time or last time?
No. So very first time I chopped off the arm because I had just. It was around that time too of the Walking Dead show, where I think they chopped off. Spoiler for the Walking Dead show here of this episode. Herschel gets bitten in the show. They chop off his leg. They're able to save him.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I gotta save myself here to keep protecting Clementine. So chop the arm off. Let's go here.
Yeah.
And then it ends up just not mattering at all. So you still succumb at the. So again, the episode. Do we just want to get to the ending here? Just kind of talk about what happens at the end.
We sure could.
Okay, so basically the Walking Dead game ends here with Lee dying pretty much here. Like he's pushed himself as far as he can. Basically, he can no longer really kind of continue with the energy. So he's basically talking to Clementine at the end there in this, I think, jewelry store.
Yeah.
Basically just kind of giving her some points, and then he asks her to handcuff him to a radiator. So if he were to turn all of a sudden, there would be a good chance he wouldn't get to her and bite her. Something goes wrong where there's this dead cop who's still chained to a chair there basically.
He's like fallen into a jewelry case and he's stuck in walker form because he can't get the energy to push himself out. Yeah.
He ends up breaking free and coming after Clementine. So Lee's kind of like trying to fight there at the end to help save Clementine, kicks a bat over to her, at least in my version. Kicked a bat over to her, and then Clementine ends up beating the cop to death. The dead cop, I should say here.
Right.
But
takes out the walker.
Takes out the walker here, basically. And then there's just like the touching moment between Lee and Clementine where they're kind of are just talking about some more keys to survive here. And then it ends up coming down, I think, to the choice of Clementine having to shoot Lee before he fully turns into a walker.
Yep. The final lesson. Because, I mean, it's... did you have more to go on for that?
So then to kind of rewind back there, so the end point is always the same of Lee dying. The first time, obviously, I didn't know that. So I was like, okay, chop my arm off here. Let's go here. I'm going to live to, make it through this here. And Clementine and I are going to be all right. And then you end up dying. And it's like, well, shit, that didn't matter here, basically. So the second time through, I obviously knew that I remembered that point going in. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to chop the arm off because I know I'm going to die. And I think if I remember right, there's a scene where you're pushing through a horde of walkers from the hotel as you're like episode 5, as you're moving either into or out of the hotel. I think it's out of the hotel.
You chop them all up going into the hotel and get covered in their guts. And then at the end, you leave just walking through them.
Yeah, I remember there was some point where, like, I think it's because you chop the arm off, you still keep getting bitten by or like attacked by the walkers a lot more. Like it hurts you more and more, I think. But like because I didn't chop the arm off, or maybe I was just really bad at the gameplay at the time back then here. But because like I had both arms there, I was just destroying all the walkers on my way into the hotel.
Yeah, with one arm, I was also destroying them. Yeah, it was fast as I could click them. Yep. Just a montage, effectively.
Yep.
But does that end up having any bearing? Like it's still the exact same ending as far as when he's dying. Like you get all the final dialogue moments if he still has the arm.
Yeah, my remembrance of what happened at the end of episode 5 from way back when is not very good. I just remember you kind of talk about a few different things, and then it's just kind of like, okay, you kind of have to shoot me.
Yep. So, Birdie, were you about to ask a question? Launch in?
If I was, I've forgotten.
All right, no worries. I thought I heard you. Saw your mic thing perk up. So yeah, it's and you mentioned like the way that you have to kind of tell Clementine how to survive at the end, and really throughout the game, you've been having the choice to try and build her up as trying to get her prepared to survive in this world for a bit anyway. Because I think it's episode 3, whenever you're on the train, that the hobo man that you find in the train says, "Hey, you are going to get that girl killed if she doesn't know how to survive in this world. And says like she needs to learn how to shoot a gun. She needs to cut her hair so she doesn't have a big curly mop hanging out the back of her ball cap that she wears all the time. And she needs to be involved in the planning. You need to have a plan, and she needs to be involved in it. And so at that point, I believe there's choices you can make to determine, like, well, how much do you want to go through with that? I mean, you still cut her hair. You still train her with a gun for that episode. But then at that point, you can then, like, take her on, like, big heist sort of missions with you, and she can have a pivotal part of the story from there. And so
it was Chuck the hobo trade man. That's what I wrote down.
Chuck the hobo trade man. Yeah. So it's one of those things that's... I didn't remember necessarily working, building up Clementine that much in the previous time I played through it, but looking through my decision tree, I apparently did. So I did the exact same thing. I think, yes, you should, regardless of age, if this is the world, you need to be prepared to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was one of those things it also gets into a bit of the way the story's structured and the way that they shuffle things around. That at that point, like, my Clementine had shot multiple walkers. And then it gets to the point where there's a security guard there, and she's freaking out about how to deal with it. It's like, yeah, okay, it is scary still, but like you've dealt with this a lot already. So,
well, in your case though, she had shot walkers. Was it more? It was more of a safety. Well, I should. Maybe there was more like safety involved in the beginning time of when she was shooting them. Like obviously you're shooting these walkers, nothing's really too safe, but like.
Yeah,
the situation might have been slightly different though, whereas like in the jewelry store though, she's basically being attacked and kind of having to think on her feet, whereas before she could have probably maybe been just a little bit more prepared. I would say.
It was the first time she was on her own dealing with it for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I've heard if you don't take her on the heist, then she apparently does take out a walker. I did some wiki reading. She takes out a walker that busts into the house that she gets left at with the sick guy there. So that would have been a situation there. It's just one of those things, whenever you get into choices like this for these games, it's just like, it's almost impossible to account actually for all of them throughout. So you have to kind of shove things in. Like, to give an example of it, in the first episode, Purdy, you probably made the choice between Doug or Carly while in the pharmacy. Like who you had to go save.
Was that the dad or the?
It's the tech nerd or the
reporter.
Pretty reporter.
Oh yeah, right before as you're escaping. Yes.
Yep. And so one of them has to die at that point, and the other one survives. And you make that decision, and then by episode 3 or is it the end of 2, they are dead. Whoever you save is dead anyway, so that's the end of that. Like your choice ultimately doesn't really affect the entire story.
There goes my love interest.
Yeah, so she's kind of set up to like be just a companion. Like episode 1, I saved Carly because she was the proficient shooter there compared to Doug. Doug was just more of a tech guy, and obviously the world's gone to hell. Tech's not really a big issue right now, so I saved her. And yeah, she does sort of become a love interest as you kind of... I think that kind of develops more in episode 3 because you and... Like, they kind of make a point of it of, like, as Lee talking to her, there's, like, a lot more discussion between the two of you. And then there's that spot at the... I'd say it's about the middle point of episode 3 where it's just like, oh yeah, now she's dead.
Yep. Yep. Things go south pretty much from that point, and that's probably the most like misery on top of misery point is things going on there.
I think episode 3 is like, if you want to talk misery, that's the big one there, basically, of everything going on in episode 3.
Yep. Because I thought again, like, well, no, after that you meet Chuck the railroad hobo, and that's nice, and you get to work on a train. That's cool. Except, oh wait, Kenny's child has been bitten and is turning into a zombie in front of his eyes. And that's a whole terrible, tragic moment as well. So,
yeah.
There's plenty to go back to, Perd, if you decide that you wanted to. But yes, it's go ahead.
Were you speaking of Kenny? Were you ever on Kenny's side, or were you always kind of pushing against him?
I think in the previous time that I played it, I was pretty much Team Kenny all the way. But this time, I definitely struggled with him a lot more because he was just more brash. Mostly, I think the first time it was just like, well, Larry's a complete asshole, so no, forget him.
Mhm.
But there were definitely moments where, like, I saved Duck, and then he just runs off and doesn't try to save Sean at all, and then Sean dies, and so it's just like
Yeah,
things.
what the heck?
Yeah,
That part was so illogical. Like, son gets saved.
yeah.
Could easily help, at least try help. We just got to this place, and they're letting us stay here for free.
He's very
But
much
instead
a
he's just
lookout
like,
for.
"Nah, I'm out." And then he wants you to be his like ally. The rest of the game's like, hey, you got us kicked out of that nice farm.
Yeah.
Let
And,
that dude die.
Yeah.
Jerk.
I think multiple times I wrote down "fuck Kenny" basically this time.
Yeah, I have a note about Larry somewhere on here, but yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't think I have anything about Larry here.
Larry, total fucker. Yeah.
I will say I loved when I first turned on the game because it gave me that Xbox 360 load up and chime sound, and it told me I was online at the bottom.
Okay. So
the nostalgia was just whew.
You played the 360 version then, huh?
Well, that's just what I got from Game Pass on my Xbox One.
You might want to look at that again there. I got the Xbox One version on Game Pass.
Is there two versions on Game Pass?
There may be.
There might be. I guess mine was the Xbox One version.
Hey,
I played it.
you played the original. Good for you. I support that from what I've seen of the remaster.
Oh yeah. Also, to add a little bit of detail about Kenny, I wrote down he's a Florida man.
That's true. He is a Florida man. Yeah.
Through and through.
So yeah, my dad would have been remiss if, with our Georgia heritage, I just fully accepted the Florida man into my life. So, but I mean, there are certain times where he has good, not necessarily good moments, but he has understandable moments. He has empathetic moments, despite being someone who does not do empathy well himself. Especially,
I'm sorry. I was gonna say that's definitely like the one thing about this game that they do fairly well is they build you characters that are relatable and somewhat real life. Even though like we may not have experienced people like these in our real life, they're definitely people that you could feel as being a real character, kind of doing what the best they can basically in a situation like this.
Yeah, it's just people trying to survive. Really, is kind of the basics of it, and they show a couple different points. Whenever you go down to Savannah, Georgia, and get to the coast, which has been the goal in Kenny's mind, is get to Savannah, get a boat. You get down there and you see that like, nope, this is the people trying to survive here have like killed things in mass, including like they've shunned women or not women, but children and elderly folks from their society because they're too weak and they're purely focused on survival. And you could be playing the game like that yourself to an extent. You can turn people away who show up, or you can try and accept them into the group. So given that I was someone who was trying to accept everyone I could into the group, it's definitely just it really shows you and highlights the different ways that you can go about trying to survive in a world like this, I think. But I don't remember my point there. And yeah, like the way that Kenny kind of gets written, he becomes bearable, degrees of bearable, I think, starting after episode 4. Episode 3 ends with basically him losing his wife and child at the moment where it's the kid has to be taken care of because he's been bitten. They go off into the woods to say their final goodbyes, and the wife kills herself instead of living in a world without her son. So then Kenny is now left without wife and child for the rest of the game, and I cannot imagine something like that. So just like to try and be an asshole to that guy is tough. But at times he still left me moments. There was a point where after you've been bitten, he's basically trying to really get around to like, well, we need to take care of you as soon as we can then. Like, yeah, okay. Says the guy that like put the sun thing off until the very last minute. Now you want to start a whole so I've argued with him at that point. Very
couldn't even
vehemently.
do it himself either, too.
Right.
His own son.
Well, I guess. Yeah. I know there's the option to essentially shoot Duck yourself to like opt to do that for him. But there also are dialogue options to say, no, Kenny, you should do this. Is there a way to make him do it? I think so, right? Isn't that one of the decision trees?
I went down that path in my earlier playthrough, but I just don't think he does it because I remember killing Duck both times.
Okay.
Myself. So I think you can kind of try and push him towards that, and then he just doesn't do it.
Yeah. Well, I guess one of the decision trees is did you shoot duck in episode 3?
Oh,
So what?
nothing. You guys are murdering kids over here.
He was no longer a child. He had lost his innocence. He was full walker at that point.
Yeah. So there's two things that could happen. Like you could shoot duck when he actually turns, or you can actually shoot him before he turns too. Because I remember first time I played through, he ended up turning into a walker, and then I
Oh.
shot him. And then the second time, he was still a kid, but he was basically dying. I'm pretty sure I shot him.
Yeah. So
It's
I
don't know if you experienced this, Perd, with your short playthrough. Maybe you did, JC, with this too. But this kind of happens in some video games like this, where dialogue's a big thing like that. Did the options that you chose ever end up being like not quite what you thought they were going to be?
I'll let Purd take this one first.
Say that question one more time.
So, like, it presents you with the options for the dialogue to choose there. Were there ever some times where basically, like, you chose that dialogue option and what happened wasn't quite what you thought it was going to be?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. Actually, I have a note on this with the dialogue. I was pretty pleased with the fact that usually what I was thinking I would say if it was actually me was generally an option. A lot of times when I played games with the dialogue option, it's just like two options that I don't want to say.
Yeah.
And I also love that you could just choose to not say anything, and that did have an effect. Because I was like, there was a few times where I was like, I don't like any of these options that much. Let's just see if I shut up what happens.
Yeah.
But I really can't think of any time where I said something thinking there'd be a response. I mean, that didn't happen. I'm sure there was some, but I don't remember now.
And I feel like in the first episode, there's so many less variables that you're dealing with that isn't as prominent. Because I definitely noticed it the further I got on into the story that would happen. I had a note about it specifically. I want to say in episode 4. There's I can't find it here, but essentially it's an episode where it's episode 3. Whenever Lily and Kenny are arguing, I couldn't actually tell whose side I was on, because half the time I would choose a topic there, and like I would think I'm siding with Kenny, but then it would cut to the next scene, and here Kenny's acting like I sided with Lily, and I'm like, what? It was just this huge disconnect between what I thought I was trying to say versus how the characters were acting about what I was saying. There wasn't a lot of difference necessarily there in like what I selected versus what Lee said. It was just a difference in how everyone else reacted to it that sort of broke that disconnect for me.
So my big disconnect came in episode 3 as well, but I was on the train with Kenny. This was before the decision had been completely made that we have to take care of Duck.
Yeah, whenever he's getting ill in the back train car, and you have to convince Kenny to go back.
And you end up getting into a fight with Kenny, basically, or at least I did, in the engine there of the train. And just the choices I was making, I was like, okay, this is not what I want to say here.
Yeah.
And I will say, though, this game does the dialogue options a lot better than most other games. Like, for example, the Mass Effect games are real big with their dialogue trees and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Those games give you, like, they type out like a short blurb of what you kind of regard, the gist of what you're going to say, but what you actually end up saying isn't what they typed out there in the line.
Yeah, like the classic Mass Effect thing of like, you say, this interview is over to a reporter. What actually happens? You punch that reporter in the face. Like, that's not what I expected to do, but okay, I guess that's what happened.
Yep. Whereas in The Walking Dead here, they at least basically type out pretty much, this is what you're going to say. So go ahead and choose that option and say it. Which I am glad they did it like that for the game.
Mm-hmm. And I also did appreciate the silent option. I know some folks have done like full silent playthroughs and all that. Like, no, I still like to have my own voice, but sometimes, like you mentioned, the devs don't necessarily have all with their 3 options. They aren't necessarily saying everything that I would want to say. So I just say nothing. Or sometimes you just don't think of it in time, and that happens too. And whenever you actually are in the middle of a conversation and someone's asked you a question, they're not literally going to sit there and wait for all of time for you to answer. Eventually they'll just be like, all right, I guess you don't have anything to say, and then move on. So I also appreciated the timer system to the conversation. I felt like that really, it kind of tied with the gameplay, in my opinion, where like you have to make these decisions somewhat quickly. You can't just rely on purely being able to think over a situation with infinite amount of time and resources. You just have to go with what you feel is right at that moment, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On that note, did everybody live with their choices that were made, or did you ever try and like back out of the menu and try and get a re-roll of something that happened?
No, I kept the choices that I had made basically throughout the game and just kept going here.
Yeah. I fully did a reroll this time. I feel like I did not in my previous playthrough, but in this case, and speaking to the control issues with the mouse that I was mentioning earlier, you at some point have to jump off a bridge and catch the train that's coming beneath you with a new guy that you just met, Omid, who shows up in episode 4.
Would be
Yes, looks like it.
Yeah, it would have to be 4 because episode 3 ends on the cliffhanger of the walkie-talkie.
Oh no, yes, episode 3, A Helping Hand. Did you help Omid? That's my thing. So yeah, essentially he falls, and it's like I want to say near the very end.
Yeah, it would have to be 3 then.
Yeah. So
you're at 4. Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry.
You're at the edge of the bridge, and you have to say, like, all right, we got to jump. And he goes, what? No. And so you have the chance to push him or whatever. Anyway, he falls and hurts his leg while, because he just lands poorly. And you make it onto the train, and then he is managed to hobbling up, and his girlfriend, wife, Krista, at the time, is just also trying to run up there alongside, but she's like this athlete, and she's not hurt. And so I wanted to grab Omid's hand, but instead the camera shifts, and so then I click on Krista's hand, and I pull her up, and then Omid falls behind, and everyone's pissed at me, and he dies. And it's like, well, I feel like I wanted to choose Omid there. The game just forced me not to. So then at that point, I just did a quick escape main menu and replayed that scene so I could actually do the thing that I wanted to do. But otherwise, yeah, I definitely tried to just focus on like, if I chose something poorly myself, then that was what I lived with. That's how I did it the first time. That's how I did it this time as well.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any points that you really just kind of did the opposite of what the player base did whenever you're looking at your stats and went like, oh, like for me, it was like, did you save Doug or Carly? And like you said, Carly's a good shooter and all that. Doug, I this time saved him. And that was one of those first decision points where it's like, well, I know this doesn't matter, and I'm going to try the other one. And so I ended up choosing Doug, and he builds this intricate alarm system at the base using all these different doorbells and stuff that he finds around. So like there's all these strings all over the place, and you hear these different ringings happen whenever folks are coming in. So it's kind of an interesting little twist to it.
So I'm just reviewing my choices here. For the most part, episode 1, it was either like 50 or high 40s there. Basically, I was with the player base on that, 50% or 47%, something like that. The episode 2 was about roughly the same, 43, 60, 50, 61, 48.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of those were like a lot of those decisions were split between the player base anyway, right?
Yeah. And then episode 3 is like the first big one that comes up of it asking, did I shoot Duck? And I sided with 81% of the player base and shot Duck. And then the other one would be episode 5 would be, or no, this is 4, sorry. Did I reveal my bite to the group? And I sided with 80% of the players and said yes.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's actually one above that too. Did you kill the boy in the attic? I sided with 73% of the player base and did kill the boy.
Yeah, I did not. Yeah, I was in the rarity a couple times. So,
You didn't kill.
Well, I basically to give Kenny like some strength as well. I said like, all right, hey, you couldn't do it with your own kid. I get that, but like this is still the world we live in, so you need to be able to do this when it's necessary. So I had Kenny do it. Those are your options there, I think.
I think maybe that was, if I'm thinking back to my first playthrough, that might have been the disconnect between me and Kenny there of I told him to do it and he said, yeah, he'll do it, but then he didn't do it or something like that.
Interesting.
I just remember there was this weird time of basically of like killing a kid, and the big thing that is, but there's like I tried to get him to do it and he didn't do it for whatever reason.
Yeah. So there was a few of those, like the Doug one was the biggest one I think that I didn't side with folks because that was me and 23% of players chose Doug. Otherwise, I was typically in the majority, aside from that boy in the attic thing. And I feel like that was something they kind of worked towards near the end. They mentioned like trying to find those. I remember reading dev interviews at the time that basically like they realized that if they have a decision point where 90% of the players choose that option, they've made a poor choice at that point, because why give the agency if the majority of people are going to think that that's the best option? They should have written the other side's argument better, or they should make a different choice about it, something like that. So
I guess it was episode 5 where I really was out of the majority there on a lot of the stuff. So, removing Lee's arm, I was in the 37% there because I didn't do it.
yeah,
34%, I calmly argued with Kenny. I didn't lose my temper.
I lost my temper. I was ready to punch him in the face.
Sided with 19%. I did not surrender my weapons when I was captured by the guy in the hotel. 34%, I did kill the stranger. And then 60%, I made sure Lee didn't turn.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things I think with this stat thing is that it's always like based on when you're looking at it, it's pulling in the data. I wish it had gone back and like if it had saved what the stats were whenever I made those first choices when I first played through the game. I think that would have been more interesting to see like at that time, just after it came out, what the split was. Because I mean, even as you're reading off those percentages there, those are a few percentage points off of mine. Like, for me, 40% of players did not surrender weapons, but you said it was only like 19% for you, right?
Yeah.
So,
but I'm on the Xbox One, though. So
that's true, too. So that's it, too. I mean, it's all going to Telltale's servers. You'd think they could have a split there, but yeah.
Perd, do you have your stats for episode 1?
Yeah, I'm curious how you played.
I was kind of Googling the stats, and I know the decisions I made because it was a short episode, obviously, compared to the ones you guys did. But yeah, it looks like, I mean, like you said, the first episode was relatively split. The only one I really didn't follow along with was I lied to Herschel. I didn't tell him the truth because I thought he'd kick me out or something.
Yeah.
If I told him I was a criminal.
I did as well.
And then I saved Sean over Duck, but that was almost split 50.
Yeah. That was also an odd decision for folks who had read The Walking Dead already, because like Sean Green is an iconic Walking Dead figure in the first 10 issues of the Walking Dead comic or something like that, right?
Oh, you're asking me a question about a comic I haven't read in years now.
Well, so the Green Farm is one of the iconic moments where the Greens are just Herschel's a vet and all this stuff, and he's doing great, and then in the story, I can't remember the main character's name in the book and show. Rick, yes, yep. So then Rick and crew basically find that this barn that Herschel's been covering up all this time and being coy about is teeming with zombies who have been living in there. And you find out that it started essentially because his boy died and became a zombie, and he couldn't bear to re-kill his boy, so he kept him in the barn and all that stuff. So like, Sean Green is a character who is famous for being dead already. So it was one of those things. Yeah. Did you not make that connection before?
No, like my problem is my memory of The Walking Dead is kind of interconnected too with the TV show. So a lot of times the stuff from the TV show just bleeds over into what I remember about the comics there.
Fair. So yeah, I don't know if that's exactly how it is in the TV show at least, but yeah, that was at least the comic book version of events was that, Sean Green is a dead guy and he's a zombie, and that's the whole thing about Herschel's farm. So whenever you first show up to Herschel's farm and everything's idyllic, you're like, oh, it's Sean Green. And so it skews the things right there that like, oh, well, I could try to save Sean Green and maybe that changes this world from the thing, but no. You're living in the you're living in the comic book world. Sean Green dies at some point. So, yeah. And then there was the point, another decision tree for episode 1, just to focus on these more, to give Perd more to talk about. Siding with Kenny whenever Larry is attacking Duck, essentially saying that he's been bitten because he's covered with blood from a walker, which...
Yeah, well, I hated Larry most people, so I was willing to take the chance there and be wrong just to spite Larry.
Yeah, Larry, he, I'm he leaves the story in a crazy way. Essentially, he has a salt block crush his head. So if you
Huh.
want to see him get his comeuppance, keep playing. But he was definitely, I feel like, one of the weaker characters, just because he is just such an antagonist. Like, he's clearly just a complete asshole, and they don't write him with much nuance at all. So I was glad to see him go from a story perspective, just because, like, Kenny, he's got these different sides that he's coming at things. He's got these issues he's dealing with, and Larry is just like, I'm mad, and I'm gonna get a heart attack when I get too mad. That's his thing, and that's it. So, yeah. Next decision point was giving Irene the gun, the lady at the hotel. Did you?
Honestly, I'm kind of on the. I don't remember what I did now. I think I might have given it to her because then she shoots herself. Correct?
Yep.
I think I did because yeah. So maybe that's another one I sided against.
Yeah.
But she seemed pretty set on what she wanted to do. So I was like, you know what? If that's how you want to go out, then fair enough.
Yeah. Yep. And then you saved Carly because you had your love interest with her, right?
I did. I was like, maybe there's a chance here,
Yeah.
and then yeah, like Tyler said, the other guy seemed relatively, and I won't say useless, but he just seemed kind of.
Yeah. And
she had a gun and she was sniping things in the face. It's like,
yeah.
this seems a bit more useful in this world.
Kind of going back to your character development stuff too, it felt like you talking to Carly was more engaging than talking to Doug was.
True. Yeah. And then, I don't know, she was also written a little strange as well, because, like, she's sitting there looking at a radio, and she's like, this isn't working. How come? And, like, there's no batteries in it. And, like, oh, here's some batteries. Oh, I put them in. They still don't work. Oh, they're backwards. Like, she's a little dumb sometimes, too.
That's fair.
But it's definitely written versus, like, the smart versus the dumb. The pretty and somewhat useful shooter versus the nerdy, chubby guy. Like, who are you going to take? And it's like, giving it to a bunch of folks playing a video game. Yeah, they're probably going to take the shooting lady.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one of those choices.
Lady.
Yeah. But it was interesting having Doug. He dies the exact same way as Carly does. It's nothing changes there.
It's like I did some reading on this because I was just kind of curious about that scene. It's slightly different though about the argument that gets into, isn't it?
Maybe it could.
Lily.
Well, I guess remind me how Carly's situation goes.
So I think Lily says it's Ben who was stealing the supplies from the hotel there, and we get into this argument out there, and Carly kind of sides with Ben, but just more of like to calm Lily down, I think.
Yeah.
And then there's this decision gets made and stuff like that, and everything goes fine, and then all of a sudden there's just cut to shot in the face.
Oh, she just straight up. Yeah, okay.
It's like just shoots her out of nowhere, pretty much.
Okay, that is a little bit different, because at some point, like, Doug tries to do the heroic thing. She's about to shoot Ben, and then Doug grabs Ben and throws him out of the way, and he's like, does a thing where he grabs Ben and then throws him behind him. So then as Lily is tracking Ben, pulls the trigger, and then it's as Doug is standing in front of Ben, so he gets shot. So that is a little bit different then. Yep. Yeah, because I remembered it being a very out of left field thing with Carly whenever I originally played it, but I don't remember that it literally actually is. I thought it was just like, oh yeah, and I just remember it being crazy that Lily actually pulled the trigger. Yeah.
What did you guys do with Lily? Did you leave her or did you guys take her with still? Or did you leave her aside the road?
Well,
actually, no, just you, JC.
Right, yeah. I took Lily with. Yep, I did not leave her.
Okay.
I think the thing, and I thought that I did the same, or I did the opposite last time, but apparently I did not abandon her then either. But I think that no matter what you do, she takes the RV, whether she ends up like walking behind you and catching up to you at the train that you're pulled over at, or whether she just takes over from within the RV. I can't remember exactly what the difference is there. Did you take her with?
The first time I think I took her with and she stole the RV. The second time I left her, but I don't think she steals the RV. I think
you just have the RV and you just leave it there?
I think you just leave it there.
Oh, all right. Well, there we go.
I mean, you got a train now.
Yeah, fair enough. Yep. Okay. Well, overall, I think any other notes that anybody else has that wants to mention? So I've got a couple things I could bring up, but I'm just hitting my notes here.
Minor detail in episode 2, they show the Georgia State Quarter.
Oh.
Generally just fuck Ben. He's another. I don't know why I kept saving him. I saved him both times, both places.
Yeah, so he gets.
A couple of times where Clementine's a nice sharpshooter. Basically, you're in a situation she just drops somebody.
Yep.
So I did notice the rebel flag in the auto shop when you're going through the school there.
Oh, yeah, I did not notice that.
Just a background detail there, basically.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the big thing, episode 5 there. So since I kept the arm there, like they made it, it was just kind of a real noticeable thing there. Like his arm was just nice and shiny and just sticking out all the time, and he had his sleeve tucked up and stuff like that too.
Because I was gonna ask too, like, I wonder if they change the animation at all? Like whenever you're climbing up the elevator and all that, is he using 2 arms, or is it like, oh, my arm hurts so bad that I can't use it, and so he's still climbing with 1 arm?
I think he was climbing up with both arms.
Okay. All right, that's a touch I didn't expect. That definitely looked like something to me that they would just like swap in the model and not have to change the animation, so they would just do that. But
of course, now I'm interesting guessing myself, but I think
because just basically it's one of those things where I think is like they also break down at points whenever you can take multiple people in a group, who was there essentially, and so at one point whenever you can go off to try and find Clementine, that once she gets abducted in episode 5. End of 4, you can go off to look for her alone entirely. Apparently, I have not actually witnessed that, but like if you go there, like 1, can you still cut off your arm? Do you just do it yourself? And then 2, like there's a lot of things that like later on you have to carry a ladder and cross over to a bell to ring it, and so then like Lee carries it by himself, and I just every time I see something like that in a game like this, I'm thinking like, well, he has to carry it himself, because if he can't carry it himself, then that means that whenever you go alone, you can't do it, which means the entire story from here on out is different, and they have to change this and that and this and that. So I just always like to, I don't like to, I just like always, those things always stand out to me, trying to figure out like what parts of these don't change.
Yep.
So, yeah. One of the notes I have for episode 1 is just hammering Sandra's head. What the hell? That's the babysitter at Clementine's house. Whenever you like the first real walker that you kill, that's not like with the gun there, and you just have like a blunt weapon, and you can just keep clicking that head and just turn it into nothing, which is like, man, okay. It felt like it was a strong start to say like, yeah, this world is crazy. This is a ridiculous thing. Yeah, going back to Carly, whenever they say like, oh, it needs batteries, her reply is, oh, I wouldn't know what to look for. How do you not know what batteries even are? Oh my gosh.
But she can shoot.
Right.
But she knows how to shoot a weapon, but she doesn't know what batteries are.
Don't forget, she's a pretty lady.
That's right. Manages a clip like nothing, but as soon as you ask for AA, she... I thought there was a COVID sort of reference. At some point, they're talking about how the world has changed, and the line is barbecues, beers with good friends. These are the things that we live for. I'm just like, yeah, it's been rough without it.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
There was a lot of better writing lines in here. Like I have most of my notes are actually just like, oh, that's a good line. And I just wrote down the line. You know, it's I did not remember the writing being as good as it was. Honestly, I just remember like the story beats being strong and engaging. But I was really impressed with that actually. Basically talking about how Kenny's reactions are. He's talking to Ben and he goes, I think it could make you anything. Nothing good. Losing your wife and kid like that. Yeah, just a lot of good stuff. Oh, another one that I got a disconnect for, seeing this note. Krista, it turns out, is pregnant with Omid's child. That's why she's been super protective of Omid and trying to make sure that she doesn't get involved with the group that can cause them to be split up or anything like that. And for whatever reason, however I played this playthrough, she never told me that she was pregnant. And then
I didn't get that either. I remember that now. Like there was a couple of points that kind of came up, and I think I wrote it down.
Yeah, because at one point, basically, like right before you leave to go find Clementine on your own, you say like, "Hey, well, you're walking for 2 now, Krista. You need to be careful." And it's like, how does Lee know that? Like, we have not discussed this at all. So somehow in my first playthrough, I knew that and had that knowledge going in here, but Lee didn't know that, which was strange. I think we've come close to exhausting it, unless anybody else has any other notes.
None for me. Should we pick the next game?
I think so.
I was going to ask there, Perd, like with listening to JC and I talk about it, do you kind of have like an appreciation for why we enjoyed the game, or kind of do you kind of like a better understanding of what the game was about then?
Oh, yeah. So I guess maybe a good way to sum it up for me is I get why I get why maybe many people enjoy the game and the story. For whatever reason, it wasn't for me. But yeah, it's not a game where I'm like, how does anyone like this game? It'd be something for like, I had way more fun listening to you guys talking about it than play it personally. Maybe that's a little mean, but it's just...
And
so
yeah, I enjoyed the game, and I don't think I'll be going back to it in another 10 years. Gameplay wise, there's just not much going on. They do elevate the gameplay as it goes into the series, like what's normally a shooting thing, and it has like this very oversized crosshair that has like the gun icon on it whenever you're shooting it at a character. I think there is some shooting in the first episode, right, where you're using the gun directly.
I think so.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, Perd would be able to speak to that more, I think, directly, since he's not going to be mixing episodes up.
I don't remember. There's only one point I remember using a gun, and that was right after the crash, using the shotgun.
Okay, yeah. So there's that one.
On the cop as he's crawling towards you.
And at least with a shotgun, it's like it's a wide enough thing, whatever. But like whenever you're using a pistol, like that giant crosshair isn't the greatest. But then by episode 4, whenever you roll into Savannah, it was a jarring thing. You go to use the gun, and it's a first-person shooter at that point. Like you are looking down the barrel of the handgun, shooting at things across the street. And it was just they definitely changed up the way that they were trying to put the gameplay in through different points. Yeah, but I still think it's just like on the whole, it's not a great game. It's not a great playing game. It's a really great story with good writing. But it's such a personalized story with the way you do your choices that I know how that story goes, and if I go back, then that changes the story. Like some of the things I did this time, like they just ended up not being what I intended versus how I had originally played it. So then now I have this weird sort of dissonance in my head that like, well, the story is this and it's also this, and yeah, I don't know. It was good to go back to it, though. I was glad to revisit it.
So the ending of the game, JC, did you kind of have that same response that you did when you and I first talked about it many years ago, or kind of since you kind of knew what was going to happen, did it kind of change how you felt about the ending?
I feel like in my memory, the ending was longer, actually. It was like I got to a point and where I was like choosing dialogue options, thinking like, okay, well, I've got a few more things to say here. And then all of a sudden, like, oh no, it's ending right now. Okay, whoops. I guess I've said all I can say. But otherwise, I remembered also the handcuff to the radiator thing. That's a choice. You don't need to be handcuffed. You can actually use the handcuff. You can tell Clem to handcuff the guard. And so then the guard is basically handcuffed with his hands pushed off to his right so that he's not going to be easily able to grab Clementine as she comes up to grab things from his left side. And then that still goes poorly. It's still the whole drag thing. But then you at least have a hand you can reach out and grab and throw the bat to her easily and go from there. The very ending, at least with the Clementine, the final shot of the thing is that Clementine is just out in a field alone, just with a gun, just walking around. and she sees two figures walking out in the distance, and she's just staring at them like, oh no, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen here? And it just keeps going, figures, Clementine, figures, Clementine, figures. And then the figures stop and look towards Clementine, and it cuts back to Clementine, and it's like, oh, that's it. Thanks for playing The Walking Dead. In terms of that, it was still just like, okay, that's a weird thing, because you've set Clementine up to meet other people. You know that people are supposed to be around waiting for her at that point, at least in my story. So to then have her be like off on her own was just strange, I think.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I remember the distinction, like I said here before, when my first playthrough was I was using Lee to protect Clementine the whole way.
Yeah.
So the ending didn't quite hit me as hard. The second time here, like maybe it's changing with age, maybe it's just kind of life events kind of happening at this point in time or whatever. But it's like it hit me a little harder, I would say, this time. The ending here of your final moments with Clementine there. Like still overall, it kind of like I think I would probably say I summed up just a little bit more of like saying I felt a little bit more like I was Lee this time and not just using Lee to protect Clementine.
Yeah. I feel like Lisa was a good agent for me. Just like the way that he seems to naturally go towards things is how I would naturally go towards things. How I would hope that I would naturally go towards things in a situation like that. And yeah, it was definitely I basically ended up with the sort of same situation as last time, so it didn't emotionally affect me as much because I remembered all those moments. But I went back and I've remembered an old PewDiePie video whenever he was playing it, and basically he hits that point, and like his whole shtick is that he's always this loud, crass guy, just like was his character at the time. I don't know. I haven't watched a lot of them recently to know if that's still his thing. But you go back to that, and he's playing that finale, and he's just tearing up, and then gets to a point where he just fully starts bawling and ducks out of frame from the camera and stuff. And it's just like, yep, okay. Like that was a reminder of like, yeah, this definitely hits whenever you are engrossed in the story and all that stuff and don't know it's coming. Because yeah, for me it was just the memory of it. I just knew it was coming, and so I was still cloudy eyed, still misty eyed. Had a tear or two, but yeah.
So yeah, like to kind of just sum up The Walking Dead here very much. It's like it's a terrible playing game that you want to experience the story, and that's kind of what The Walking Dead is.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a hard time playing like the MMO style games because of that same sort of disconnect of like I click a button and then watch my character do the cool thing. I don't get to do the cool thing. I feel like a lot of that ends up getting negated later on in the series whenever you are actually pulling the trigger on the gun. Like I felt like I was a crack shot using my mouse with an aiming thing for this time instead of a controller. Oh man, that was great. So I'd be curious to, not that I have enough time to, especially with other Game Club commitments once we roll this out, but I'm now more curious than I used to be to try and see the rest of Clementine's story. I wanted to maybe go in and check out Walking Dead Season 2 and Season 3 and go from there. So.
I might actually end up doing that too, just because like the story is now somewhat fresh enough in my head that like they could be calling back to points in Season 1 and it'd be like, okay, yeah, I kind of remember doing that now.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like, where before, basically, like when I bought episode 2 and started playing it on the PC, like I did not remember hardly anything of my choices from Season 1 here. So
yeah. So maybe we'll start a little side channel in the Game Club thing and discuss The Walking Dead at some point, but we'll see. Yep. I'll have to get around to it at some point. So, yep. Well, any other questions or notes on The Walking Dead Season 1?
I'm good on my side here.
All right.
Perd?
Nope, let's do it. Next game, what's it going to be?
All right. So the way we've decided then is that we will take off The Walking Dead Season 1 from the list. And actually, I'll just move it down as a sort of completed thing.
You should make a separate like tab on there. We put all of our finished games over there, and then we kind of just put like a, yes, no thing, basically. Did we like it? Yes or no kind of thing.
Yeah, just kind of keep track of it. Would you? Yeah. Because I guess that's the ultimate kind of thing with this Game Club is that like trying to figure out like what you do like about games versus what you don't like about games, and trying to maybe use that to guide yourself towards other games like it. So, I mean, knowing what you know now, Perd, would you, if I recommended any sort of adventure game to you, would you be interested to play it, or would you be like, if it's like The Walking Dead, no thank you?
I think you should scale that back a little bit. Like Telltale games are completely different. I should say that the new Telltale adventure games are different than would you say adventure game, because as you kind of talked about, adventure games have like all those puzzles and stuff like that just got so far out there, whereas like Telltale games are more of like a story and you're building characters and stuff like that in there.
I suppose. Yeah. But I mean, there are still puzzle elements to things like that. Like whenever you are, I can't think of one right now.
There's the puzzle element with like the train having to grab the right wrench or whatever.
Yes, the train is a good
decouple the car.
Does it require a correct wrench? Because I just grabbed like the monkey wrench because I thought that was the most useful other tool. But I feel like you can just use any of them. But it was definitely
maybe it's like one of those choices that's not really a choice in the game there, because anything you choose, it's going to be better than nothing.
Yeah. So, because you ended up just using it basically as a little pry bar. So,
yeah.
To answer your question, though, no. You're okay. If there was like 3 games in a row that I didn't enjoy, then maybe I'd question your judgment. But you've also introduced me to many addicting games, so I'm not too concerned.
Fair enough.
So, like this style of game, Perd, would be something you wouldn't be interested in playing then going forward.
No. I mean, if it's a choice, I will gladly give it a fair shake. That's part of the beauty of the Game Club. You get out of your comfort zone. That's exactly why I signed up. I mean, I would have never even tried playing this game if it wasn't for this. So it's already. I had fun just experiencing something new. Just because I didn't continue with it doesn't mean that that I hated my life, but it just was not for me.
All right.
Okay.
All right. I'm setting up a wheel spin here.
So what are the choices again? One more time.
So yes, going into this randomizer pool here, we have Risk of Rain, Deliver Us the Moon, Forza Horizon 4, Outer Wilds, and The Stanley Parable.
I think too, like, when do you have to wait for the Stanley Parable, JC? Isn't it like February 5th? Wasn't there like an achievement for you or something like that?
I've read that you can actually just set your time forward and grab that achievement. But yes, there's an achievement in the Stanley Parable for I'll just pull it up exactly so I don't get it wrong. But there's an achievement.
Like playing it 5 years after you last played it, right?
Yeah. Go Outside is the achievement name. Don't play the Stanley Parable for 5 years. And I last played the Stanley Parable on February 26th, 2016. So... yes, I would be happy to break that streak just to play the Stanley Parable again. Because there's essentially as far as I understand, I could be wrong too. I think there's a file that you can have that basically tracks what you've done in the game so far, and you can delete that effectively and treat it like it's a brand new game. And I would probably do that if I were to play through it again, even though I do have other achievements to go. Yeah. So yeah, if it comes up, so be it. I'll be happy to play. Do we want to do 2 out of 3 spins for this one, or like what was the first way that we did it?
Yeah, I think like do like 3 spins, and we do like the third one there, basically, just to kind of give it a good randomization.
All right. Okay. So, first spin of the wheel, Risk of Rain. Second spin, Stanley Parable. Third spin, the Stanley Parable.
Yes.
There we go.
I was hoping it'd be this one because I am just so ready for this experience.
It's impossible for me to really give you too much of a heads up about what to expect with this game. So, yeah, I threw this into there if I hadn't mentioned that before. So, yeah, the Stanley Parable is one of my choices. It's one of my favorite games of all time. It's just one of the funnier games I played, and it just really toys with interactivity and, setting up, especially after The Walking Dead, it's going to be a very interesting game, I think, where The Walking Dead very much is shoveling you towards very defined destinations as it goes along. So you have choices, but they necessarily go to the same place. different roads, same destination. Whereas the Stanley Parable is all about just like take a different road, get to a different destination. It's I don't even know what a decision tree for the Stanley Parable would look like because it would just be a web of everything everywhere. So I'll be very excited to play through it again. And it's one of those things, you can probably finish it in 30 minutes or something like that and just reach an ending. I mean, it's one of my favorite games of all time. It's 4.5 hours is what I have in the Stanley Parable. I would also recommend, if you want more of it and you feel like you don't necessarily want to go through a wiki or something, there's also the Stanley Parable demo, which takes 30 minutes and is a completely standalone experience. It doesn't reuse any of the main points from the first game, but it also very much gives you an idea of what the first game is. So I'd recommend that as well.
So can you choose to not end the game, quote unquote, and like explore different endings, or how do you have 4.5 hours if it's a 30-minute game? I guess is my question.
There are multiple endings.
I'll get it when I see it, type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And there, as far as I know, I'm pretty sure I found an ending where it doesn't actually just end. Like you could just keep doing that. I'll tell you this. I was basically hanging out in a solarium with the narrator, just talking about life. And that was it. And he just ends it like, oh, I could just stay here forever. It's like, all right. And then that's where it was. Nothing else changed for 20 minutes.
That reminds me of Doki Doki when you are
yes,
in the, I don't even know what I'd call it. You're in like outer space or something.
The space
and you
cabin.
Just keep talking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So odd.
Yeah. So it's yeah, it'll be a good time. I think I'm eager to talk about this one with y'all.
Awesome.
All right. Any other club things that we should cover here before we sign off?
We meeting again then in roughly 2 weeks.
I'd say 2 weeks and same. I think 2 hour. Let's say 1 hour minimum, maybe if it's a 4.5 hour game. If you hate it after an hour, you've experienced enough of the Stanley Parable to say so, I guess.
Okay.
Does that sound good for y'all?
Works for me.
All right. So 2 weeks from now is February 14th. I don't know if we have other commitments. We could try the 13th, maybe if that Saturday works, or even that Friday night.
You don't want to spend your Valentine's Day with us, JC?
I would. If you talk to me about ideal Valentine's Day, it probably involves the Stanley Parable. So, but yeah, no. There are others involved in the decision tree that would probably feel less enthused. But I've showed her the Stanley Parable, my girlfriend, and she enjoyed it. We haven't. Most of those endings are not with her involved, but yes, it appeals to all demographics. So yeah, let's plan loosely for something like the Saturday or Friday of Valentine's Day, and we can always adjust from there. But I think that should do it for this episode. So,
awesome.
All right. Thanks a bunch for joining us, and we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.